Then let's continue with our third of 4 talks. Again, we're so happy to have so many excellent speakers today sharing a variety of topics in this space. And this one is fun as well. We, as kind of organizing the Kubernetes Community Days event, we want to kind of get lots of different people together, and then Gergely, the chairperson of Cloud Native Finland, and who's also working at Nokia, of course has also the organizer of the open source office program office meetup in Helsinki. Was like, yeah, where there's all of these kind of new regulations in the EU, lots of things to think about. Of course, Nokia and Ericsson and all of these are very interested in them. And people are trying to figure out what's going on. Let's bring someone here from the Linux Foundation who has a lot of knowledge on this, in this space for this as well. So we're super happy to have Mirko here. And then I was just talking to him, and I learned that he's also running one of the open source courses in which university was it? Berlin?
The Technical University of Berlin.
Technical University of Berlin, yeah. So we'll see if we can do some collaborations there as well to kind of get this even more kind of into the ecosystem here. But yes, super happy to have you here, and welcome to Startup Summit. Yes.
Thank you.
Hello everybody. I'm also super happy to be here. I always like to be where the sausages are made, basically the crowds of people who have startups and ideas and want to build things, so super happy. Now you heard 2 really amazing presentations, and the next one will be different. Because I'm going to talk about, at least partially, the most unexciting topic in the world, tech policy. Right. So, but before we jump in, right? So, who are we? I work for the Linux Foundation. In particular, I work at the Linux Foundation Europe. We're the European chapter of the Linux Foundation, and what I was asked today, which kind of surprised me because I thought everybody knows the Linux Foundation, but maybe not. So the CNCF, for example, is a project, a foundation under the Linux Foundation. The Linux kernel is a project under the Linux Foundation, and about 1,000 projects more that you have probably heard of, like Jupyter and PyTorch and many others. So these are the projects that we support, and we basically do 3 things. We, unfortunately that didn't work for me, so don't worry. Never mind, thank you. We help the project portfolio of the Linux Foundation kind of gain a bigger foothold in Europe by getting you involved. We are trying to getting you involved into the projects. And we also represent the Linux Foundation in things like policy making. I go to Brussels a lot. I was asked that too today. So that's basically the background of my day-to-day work. And my personal background is I've actually been a software developer in open source projects since 1997. I did come to Finland in the past to teach C++ programming to people here. So, but my training is actually innovation economics. And that's also what I'm teaching in Berlin. So we actually do have a course on open source and intellectual property. Where we do discuss things like business models and licensing and compliance and other things. So yes, it is taught at university, not at many. And many other things. I live close to Berlin in Germany. So, yeah, so you saw the title of the presentation, and you may have wondered, like, what does he mean, European context in cloud native computing? And I think this is really a subject that requires explanation. Have you heard of the term digital sovereignty? Okay, so, yeah. Now, the interesting thing is that it means different things to different people. So on the left, all right, you see the European understanding. We want to have the capacity to decide ourselves what technology we want to use, want to contribute to that technology, and drive digital infrastructure and technology development. On the right side, you see a slightly different vision of digital sovereignty, which is It is the capability of a country to control the internet in its own territory. Now, we're here in the European Union member state, so the left definition is the one that applies to us. But you can see a certain tension in that when you ask, say, policymakers in maybe in Helsinki, but also in Berlin and Paris and Amsterdam, what do you think about the fact that you can't get away from big cloud providers or from online collaboration tools and where there are no European alternatives? And they get quite itchy. And as you may also have noticed that recently the international security environment didn't actually get much better. In the last years it has really deteriorated, and that means that this aspect of we need to actually critically think about what technologies we deploy in our own digital infrastructure, and do they actually give us digital sovereignty? And so that's happening. Here's another example. Interoperability. Interoperability in the European context is mostly seen as a way to drive competition. So it's related to the digital sovereignty aspect that I mentioned before. It is, if we have interoperability, then we can basically switch between cloud providers, between service providers, because their services are interchangeable. Now, we all know that this hasn't really happened at the application layer, but you know where it did happen? In cloud computing, in cloud native computing in particular. So on the right side, you see a screenshot. This is a presentation that we gave at the, I didn't explain the alphabet soup at the top. The European Commission's multi-stakeholder platform for ICT standardization's task force for the rolling plan. Yeah, so the, did I not say ICT?
You said ICT, but you said ICT.
Information and Communication Technologies.
Okay.
So European Commission multi-stakeholder platform for information and communication technologies standardization is missing, good. And especially there, the task force for the rolling plan. And this rolling plan is a document that is collaboratively authored by people in this group and is submitted to the European Commission and basically sets the roadmap for technical standardization for the next 3 years. And this group is appointed by a commissioner, a director general at the European Commission. And I can say proudly that I am one of, actually the first open source foundation representative in this group. Until now, we had standards developers, member state representatives, company representatives, but no open source foundation. So this is new. And you can see kind of what we submitted there. We basically said, cloud interoperability is technically a solved problem today. If you want to look it up a little bit, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation publishes a survey every year. It's a website that shows to what extent the technologies that you heard about earlier have permeated the market. And it's amazing. It's basically like every cloud provider drives more or less the same stack. So what we presented there to the European Commission representatives was to say, actually, we don't need to use standardization to achieve interoperability in the cloud. We need regulation to break up incumbent positions. So yeah, second aspect. So the first one was digital sovereignty. This one is how do we create or foster, re-enable competition in our internal market. And now as a result, in a way, so you see there are people in Brussels, people in the member states, and they come to meetings and they say, oh, this is not a great situation, we need to do something about this. What do policymakers do if they want to do something about something? Policy and?
Regulation. Money.
Regulation and?
Money.
That was my point, thank you. Have you heard of IPSI-CIS?
Actually, yes.
Yeah, okay, so IPSI-CIS is this one I actually have to read. Important project of common European interest, next generation cloud infrastructure and services. Yeah, I couldn't memorize that.
But somehow Finland is not part of it. So.
I'm not so sure, but I'm surprised, but yeah. No, actually Finland is not part of it because it is a commitment, as you see in the second bullet, of the member states. So what has happened here is that we have proper competition regulation and antitrust regulation in the European Union. You know that, right? And that means member states cannot just go in and pick their favorites and say, I will sponsor you a little bit, worth $1 billion here and $1 billion there, to build up my national champion. Right? You can't do that. The European Commission's, the European Union's competition watchdog will come and shut this down. Except if we have primarily, prior, identified an important project of common European interest, where then the European Parliament decides that, oh, this is such an important topic that we allow the member states to suspend antitrust regulation. And it's not infinite, it's capped. In this case, it's 1.2 billion euros. And the member states that offer to participate in that are France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, and Spain. And Finland is not on it because you would have to join it. But it's not exclusive in a way. What this really means is that the member states can go, take some money, up to in total 1.2 billion, and pour it in their local IT industry to develop cloud infrastructure that can provide better digital sovereignty. So this project runs since 2 years, I think. There's also the assumption that this is like a 1.2 billion euro investment by the public, and it raises 1.4 billion euros in private co-investment. So that's pretty normal. The companies would also invest themselves. So by giving this stimulus, you're basically encouraging other economic activity, and therefore you get to this like bigger number, if it works. It works actually pretty well. Now here's an interesting bit, and that is participants will grant permissive, non-restrictive open source software licenses and actively build open source communities with the results. Does anybody see a problem so far? Okay, so overall this sounds actually not so bad, right? So we're saying, okay, the European Union coordinates that, the member states are investing money in the local IT industry, and the local IT industry develops open source software and builds communities around this. So far so good. What are the concerns you would have? You nodded, so.
Well, I mean, how do you get return on investment for those the companies that invest?
Yeah, so very good. So how do you actually benefit as the public from this? Because we're spending taxpayers' money. Now, there's another concern here. You know, I'm standing here as a representative of the largest open source collaboration in the world. What's the concern that I would have? What do you think? Are we going to have two separate cloud-native computing stacks? Are we developing one in Europe, separate from the one that is developed collaboratively globally at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation?
And also, how do you trust the people that are getting that money?
And I'm not even getting to trust. So basically, our biggest concern when we saw this was fragmentation. We basically said nothing helps us, our ecosystem, our companies, if we are creating two solutions that are not each as good as one that we developed together. This is probably what would have happened. So as the Linux Foundation, we had a very strong interest here to provide at least an influence and incentive for the outcomes of this funding that are open source to kind of merge with the wider open source ecosystem. And that's what I would like to show you now. So basically, we are trying to bridge these two camps. And you mentioned trust. The mandate that the results have to be published under permissive open source license is unfortunately slightly blurry, because it describes certain functionality, and this should be under open source licenses, but there's more activity in the project. And guess what? The companies that are getting the funding are not releasing the other parts under open source licenses. So we're already seeing this kind of like development of basically two tech stacks that are roughly doing the same thing, but not exactly. And one is open source, and one is controlled by big players who formally make some parts open source, but are not really interested in like building a community around this, because that would mean losing control. So what do we do? What's the role of an open source foundation? We capture open source development and build an open source and openly governed project around this. And we encourage the companies that are getting the funding, some of them are actually quite willing to do that, to take what they develop and host it under a foundation and neutral governance. And that's what just happened. So we launched the NeoNephos Foundation, which is a a European-hosted open source foundation that develops technologies that are actually quite related to what the Cloud Native Computing Foundation develops. So related, as you will see later, this project was announced in Chris's keynote at KubeCon, in the first 10 minutes of KubeCon. So we built a very close relationship here. And as I said, our goal here is to say, let's make sure that these two, ecosystems is maybe the wrong word, these two collaborations, the one at the CNCF and the one at this publicly funded project, that they're converging and that the results are integrated into one coherent tech stack. What is NeoNephos? It is a foundation that we host in Europe, and maybe I didn't mention that. So Linux Foundation Europe has its headquarters in Brussels, and that means that we can host projects that are legally headquartered in the European Union. And this is one of them. And basically, the IPSI CIS project has a deliverable, which is a reference architecture for cloud edge computing. Quite actually a challenging and ambitious project. And this one is supposed to be open source, and this reference architecture has mostly been developed by SAP and Deutsche Telekom, and has been donated to this project under an open source license. So we now have, probably from my perspective, the biggest deliverables that are coming out of this public investment hosted in an open source foundation since early April, so 1 month now. Like it's not, this is all like brand new news. So what does NeoNephos do? It is it's a foundation under Linux Foundation Europe. Foundation means it hosts multiple projects. So we have an umbrella structure where you have the global Linux Foundation, and the Linux Foundation hosts projects in other foundations, and the CNCF is one of them. And then foundations host projects. So it's kind of a huge hierarchy. So we host the technology that the NeoNephos Foundation develops, and that includes frameworks for interoperability, the actual platform. There's a reference platform for this cloud edge computing in there, and infrastructure. There's even hardware when we're not sure, because this was hosted by the businesses so far, and the question is how do we migrate the reference environments, etc., to the foundation. So what does this foundation stand for? This, by the way, this wording hasn't been written by me. This is written by the new governing board for this organization, where the chair of the governing board is a colleague from SAP. So this is kind of a vision that our industry members have written and said, we would like to make sure that if we develop something in Europe, it actually becomes part of the open source ecosystem. So they highlight open governance without vendor bias, meaning it's a typical open source foundation where every interested party can participate. The collaboration focuses on digital sovereignty, and the stewardship of the project is driven by the community. Now, this sounds a little bit idealistic. What we are seeing here is a bit of a tension, because the companies aren't free to decide what they want to develop under this funding program. Of course, they have deliverables, things that they need to do in a certain timeline. So one thing that we have to make sure is that as they develop their deliverables, that they can contribute that to the project, and that the roadmap of the project does not contradict what the publicly funded project produces. So this is a photo of the keynote stage. You see Chris there and Vasu, right there as well. And this is the KubeCon stage, and imagine this room. I had to basically walk this path there back 100 meters to take this picture, because the stage was so big. Like this, we had 13,000 people in London at KubeCon. And this is the announcement that we made. So we'll go through a bit more details here. These are the member companies that are participating in this from the start. Stackit is a bit of like a undercover champion, digital champion in Germany. Belongs to Schwarz Group, and that's a part of one of the biggest retailers in Europe. And they're running their data centers, like the retailers in the US. And as such, they become huge cloud providers. And SAP and Telecom, you probably heard of them. T-Systems is the IT arm of Telecom. And then smaller companies and the applied research organization of the Netherlands, TNO. So
I think you can probably say what retail is Stackit, like the legal, to make it more concrete. Or Or is that
Yeah, I could.
Yeah.
This is what a project like this looks like. You've seen something similar in Ricardo's talk, like the governance structure of a typical foundation. We have a governing board. The role of the governing board is to basically decide on the spending of the funding of the project. All our Linux Foundation projects are non-profit in themselves. We have no cross-financing. So the companies that you've seen, they pay a membership fee. This all goes into one pot, and that becomes the budget of the foundation. And then the governing board decides how this budget is spent. So they just decided to get like email services, and they decide to get GitHub Enterprise for this, and etc., things like that. And a small percentage, 7%, goes at administrative overhead to us, and that pays for things like our events team that organizes the event, or we run the legal team for all the projects, etc. So the governing board decides on how the budget of the foundation is spent. Then you have a technical advisory committee, which is the aggregate of the technical representatives of the different projects in the organization. And our technical governance in the projects is meritocratic, meaning you can contribute to any project. You don't need to be a member or a paying member in any of our organizations. You can participate in a regular, normal open source process and become visible as a contributor, and then people will pull you in and make you a maintainer. And if you're still successful, they might pull you in and make you a technical steering committee member for this project. And if you're still successful, they may actually send you as the representative of this project to the Technical Advisory Council. That's the group up there. And the projects are as what you would expect, like GitHub repositories. They have projects, they have contributors, they have maintainers, and each project has a technical steering committee, and they form the advisory council. And all of that is governed by a charter. And it might also be interesting that if you go to our project's websites, you will find the charters. You will find the technical charters, you will find the charters of the governing board, you'll find the membership fees. All of that is transparent, and we also list the companies that are members in the projects. We call this open governance. Basically, we say all these processes of how our projects decide to spend money, what is the roadmap of the project, etc., should be transparent. And this is an overview of the projects that have been added to this new foundation. If you have been working in this space, then Gardener and Garden Linux may actually be something you've heard of. It's a tool for managing Kubernetes clusters that SAP has developed. It's open source for a long time, but SAP realized that nobody actually contributes to your project if it's owned by your company. Like, nobody contributes to their competitor's product. So they said, to make this really successful as an open source collaboration, we need to move the project under neutral governance, us, so that others, like our competitors, can work with us on this project as equals. And that's what they did. This is actually a really valuable project that is in production for longer than 5 years. So this is not new. And the others that are kind of outcomes of the IPSI project, and Cobalt Core and Iron Core are basically fabrics. One targets virtual machine-based provisioning, and one bare metal provisioning for this Kubernetes stack, the reference architecture that this project develops. So basically there is already, because these projects were donated, kind of the starting point for this new foundation. And this is the value of European Union taxpayer money. Right? It's all open source now and openly governed. Now, I said that our goal, or one of our key goals, was to kind of make sure that the ecosystems converge and stay together. These are the Cloud Native Computing Foundation projects that the NeoNephos Foundation is consuming and integrating. And as you see, basically this looks like all the names that you've heard before. So this is a stack that is very compatible, very similar to what is developed at the CNCF. Which shows in a way that this goal of making sure that these ecosystems converge is actually achieved. That's it. Basically, there are some links here. We had the KubeCon keynote. We had a lot of press coverage when we started the project. And yeah, lots of public money at work. So thank you. This is what I wanted to show you, and I'm happy to take some questions.
we'll make one question.
Thanks for this. What I think is an important subject, but a point that I'd like to hear a bit about is where do you see going from all these great projects to somebody funding a whole lot of vessels running somewhere for someone to actually buy into and have this cloud infrastructure that might be like a shared resource, like from the big cloud provider? Or is this more enabling enterprises to build a cloud for themselves? Like is the multi-tenancy part that scale you've seen from international cloud providers outside of Europe, how do you see this project like maybe become that, or is that not the mission?
I'm not sure if I got the question right. I understood that you were asking if people are actually deploying this.
No,
Okay.
for this to become an alternative to the big three cloud providers and others, it needs a lot of metal to actually run somewhere so people can buy into it. And is that transitioning from all of these great projects that is in use in, as we know, a lot of enterprises, to someone buying into, say, we're going to buy 10 data centers around the world and build all of them and let people rent into it. Where do you see that? Because what's the difference between this project and all the Hesnas and the UpCloud and the OWH? Like where do you just draw the distinction between what this is from what it now can become and what it is now?
Yeah. So first, this project adds functionality that doesn't exist before. Two key parts. One is edge computing integrated into the cluster. The other one is actually offline computing. So there's a use case for this where it works in a submarine. And this whole integration stack with running on bare metal, etc., closes some gaps there that weren't there before. The other aspect, I kind of talked about development here, and we always have to make a very clear distinction between development and operations. Like the question is, will anybody take this and run data centers with it? The benefit that I see is that SAP is actually already running their data centers with that. So this is the stack that SAP is running. This is the stack that T-Systems is migrating to. And we are working with other companies, including plane makers and things like that, to join this project to also take it. Nobody knows what the future brings. Like, I can't promise that people will adopt this. But it's a question of opportunity and options as well. If you have the option to deploy something in a European context, when the need for that is there, then that option may materialize itself. So I'm happy that we have this project, and we cover mostly the development part. We cover no operations. I probably should add that too. We don't operate the data center. We only host the development activities. And now it's up to the companies to make something that, as one of our policy influencers has put it, services that European consumers would really want to buy. Right? And this is probably the challenge on top, both in terms of quality and price. Take this and run it in a way that people flock to you. And that's the next challenge.
Cool. Thank you very much.